is a Political Education for Freedom podcast. I'm Nitra, and today we're not just exploring history, we're redefining the narrative. We're delving into the roots of the civil rights movement and its transformative impact on education. Now, the last episode recorded, we talked about two key figures in the civil rights movement. We talked about Ella Baker, we talked about Claudette Colvin, and we talked about the 1967 TSU riots. We talked about some local stuff, and then we went to some of the national movements we often hear about with the civil rights movement in those different parts of education that we learn about it. But we only learn about certain people, certain events. We don't learn about everything and all those behind the scenes. So we kind of went deep into those stories and uncovered some local history that I wasn't aware of before I started researching this, and hopefully other people learn from that too. So we're talking about the civil rights movement and its impact on education. Now, this movement, born from a relentless struggle for equality, reshapes society and how we educate our youth. It's a journey through courage, resilience, and the pursuit of justice. Let's dive into the past to understand our present and shape our future. Okay, let's start at a pivotal moment in history, the Reconstruction era. Here, formerly enslaved Africans in America didn't just dream of freedom, they acted upon it. Their first priority? Education, of course. As W.E.B. Du Bois highlights in Black Reconstruction, these visionaries laid the foundations for public schools, advocating the radical idea of mass education for all. This was more than a policy shift, it was a cultural revolution. Here's some of Du Bois's work. Negroes deserve not only the pity of the world, but the gratitude of both South and North. Under extraordinary provocation, they had acted like decent human beings. They had protected their masters' families when their masters were away fighting for black slavery. They did this naturally because they were not sure that the North was fighting for freedom, and because they did not know which side would win. But at any rate, they did it. And even when they understood that the North, willing or unwilling, was bound towards freedom, and they could fight for their own freedom, they were neither vindictive nor cruel towards their former masters, although they were quite naturally widely accused of laziness and impudence, which are the only weapons of offense which a rising social class can easily use. These black men wanted freedom. They wanted education. They wanted protection. They had been of great help to the Union armies, and that help had been given under great stress. Black soldiers had been outlawed, and in many cases ruthlessly murdered by the enemy, who refused to regard them as soldiers or as humans. They took chances every time they put on a uniform. Yet after the war, they were still not free. They were still practically slaves. And how was their freedom to be made a fact? It could only be done in one way. They must have protection of law, and back of law must stand physical force. They must have land. They must have education. Now, let me share something as an educator. I'm a builder and, of course, an educator, but I'm on a mission to create a platform that teaches real history, our history, in a time where there's an assault on education, where the contributions and innovative minds of Black people worldwide are often sidelined. I believe it's crucial to get back to our roots. We're natural teachers, we're natural problem solvers, and history makers. The civil rights movement, with its fight for educational equality, is a testament to our enduring spirit. From the Brown v. Board of Education victory to the bravery of the Little Rock Nine, we see a legacy of resilience and a call to action. These stories aren't just chapters in history books, they're blueprints for our future. And the words from a member of the Little Rock Nine. And she says, at a certain point, I didn't know if I would be alive to graduate from high school or be stark, raving, insane, or deeply wounded, says Tricky. Minnie Jean was the eldest of four children born to Willie Brown, a mason and landscaping contractor, and his wife, Emma Jean, a nurse's aide, seamstress, and a homemaker. This sounds like regular Black people. Everybody got like three jobs. If we don't have three actual jobs, we have three actual skills. So we kind of threw that old um, jack of all trades, master of none. That's completely opposite for Black people. A native of Little Rock, she attended segregated schools and started senior high school as a 10th grader in 1956 at a newly opened Horace Mann School for African Americans. It was across town from where she lived and offered no bus service. In the wake of the landmark 1954 Supreme Court decision, Brown v. Board of Education, that banned racial segregation in public schools, representatives from the NAACP searched for students who would enroll in previously all-white schools through the South. Minnie Jean heard an announcement on the school intercom about enrolling at Central and decided to sign up. Although 80 African American students had been approved by the Little Rock School Board to transfer to Central the following year, the number dwindled to 10 after the students were told they couldn't participate in extracurricular activities. Their parents were in danger of losing their jobs, and there was a looming threat of violence. The parents of the 10th student, Jane Hill, decided not to allow their daughter to return after the mob scene on the first day. So initially, we can say it was the Little Rock 10, but then one, of course, pulled out, and they became the Little Rock 9. According to Tricky, her real motivation for attending Central was that it was 9 blocks from her house. That sounds like a high school kid. And she and her two best friends, Melba and Thelma, would be able to walk there. She quotes, she says, in quotes, the 9 of us were not especially political, she says. We thought we could walk to Central. It's a huge, beautiful school. This is going to be great, she remembers. I really thought that if we went to school together, the white kids are going to be like me, curious and thoughtful, and we can just cut all this segregation stuff out, she recalls. Unfortunately, she was wrong. Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus called the National Guard to keep the African American students from entering Central. When the 9 students did get into the building a few weeks later, that means these kids lost weeks of instruction. I mean, gosh, can we imagine? and I don't imagine this, but we know that it exists because it actually happened. But not just stopping the education of someone else's kid, but halting the education of your own kid. Like, you have to be a special kind of person to do something like that. You're not just, for one, it's all out of hatred because there's nothing to justify that type of behavior from an adult. But you're holding back your child. I thought that the entire purpose of them, quote unquote, fighting for white supremacy was so that their kids can continue to be ahead, and so their kids can have more knowledge than the next, and that their kids can continue to rule over other people. But yet, the logic in their mind, they're saying, no, we don't want to teach our kids because they're going to be learning on side of someone who's a different color. So I'm going to keep my child stupid just so that he or she won't learn on side of a black child. That is the dumbest I've ever, that's the dumbest logic I've ever heard. And I've seen this in reading so many of these cases, and how these parents acted is just, it's really, it's no explanation for it. But also, the weird thing about that is that this was in the 1950s, but guess what? This is 2023, and we have parents doing the same thing right now to this day. They would rather have their children be uninformed, uneducated, and stupid than for them to learn about someone else's history or culture. Because now they're not saying, I don't want you in the same school with my kid, because that's already happened. That cat's out the bag. But now they're saying, well, now I don't want you to talk about that other person's experience or that other person's culture or their background or their history. I have a personal belief that it's not because it's also because they hate it, but it's also because they don't want their kids to know how horrible people they are. They know that their kids would see it and maybe have some empathy or sympathy for the victims, and then their kids may question them, like, what kind of person are you to do that to a kid? And they think, I believe, that their kids would then, reject them, reject their ideas. Not only just reject their ideas, but also reject them and their beliefs. And we know what typically happens with white people, right? They avoid confrontation at all costs. So instead of them going up to Uncle Racist Joe every fucking holiday get together, they'll just not show up to avoid Uncle Racist. Well, I don't have time to hear Uncle Racist and his racism, so I'm just not going to the party. And then you look up and it's been 10 years and they haven't seen their family, extended family. But guess what? Even though they haven't seen their extended family, racism has seen their extended family. Uncle Racist is still racist. Just because you don't show up does not mean that his racism don't show up. The only way his racism will stop showing up is, for one, you stand up and tell him that he can't do that. And you're not going to stand for it. And he either going to shut his mouth or he going to have to get the hell out. Or you stand there next to Uncle Racist and you challenge his racism until he's uncomfortable. Until he's uncomfortable to the point where he voluntarily shuts up. Because there is no logic behind racism. There just isn't. Um, there's no logic behind it. There's also it contradicts the beliefs of those who are racist. It contradicts their every thought, any single thought or comment or idea that they have about racist or their racism. It's no logic to it. It doesn't follow. It doesn't make sense. And you, as a white person, challenge it. Just challenge it. I mean, it's that simple. Challenge it. And I believe, honestly, that it does work because this was what they were doing. They were blocking the challenge or the potential challenge to their racism. Let me be in my racism all alone or with everybody else with no challenge, no pushback or nothing. This is what they wanted. Because now I can just continue to be in my stupidity and everyone else is either just going to accept it that I'm just in my stupidity or just I'm just that type of person or they're going to, leave or not be around me. That's what they want. And so each time you see Uncle Racist and you go the other way, I challenge you to go towards them and have some information in your arsenal when you go towards him. Because I can almost guarantee you he can't refute it. And you'd also easily wrap him up in his racism to the point where he'll start questioning if his racism is sane. Because it isn't. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think that's what our job is, to challenge that stupidity. It's nothing wrong with that. Now this is the governor. He's over the entire state. He sent the National Guard to stop the black kids from entering Central High School. When the 9 students did get into the building, a few weeks later, a full-scale riot broke out, and they had to escape in speeding police cars. Now, mind you, the governor is someone who controls the state. They control law enforcement within the state. Um, well, with the I can't say with the exception because the governor does control it. Does control law enforcement. They do have different jurisdictions and things like that, but the governor controls the jurisdictions throughout the whole state. So, yeah, but the governor does control law enforcement all throughout the state. hmm He controls, of course, the National Guard. Um, I can't say the governor had the power to um to control law enforcement, and he had the power to get rid of that mob that was pretty much staked out in front of Central High School, waiting for the black kids. The governor had the power. That's no question or debate there. Um, I it was just making me think about how the different law enforcement agencies fight over jurisdictions and how you have cities and um they are the law enforcement is established through the city ordinances, and then you have the sheriffs, which is totally different, and they are under a different command. But when I think about the state as a whole, because the state has its own law enforcement agency too, which is, whatever it may be, state troopers. And then they also have the power to deploy National Guard, but no, not but, and in those instances, those law enforcement entities would have to give commands to those local law enforcement agencies. So, yeah, the governor had all the power. He could have stopped it. Um, so the Little Rock Nine weren't able to enroll until 2 days later when President Eisenhower sent 1,200 paratroopers from the 101st Airborne Division with bayonets fixed. Oh my gosh. This doesn't make sense. The soldiers escorted the students single file into the school and dispersed the jeering protesters. Although troops remained at Central High School throughout the school year, the Little Rock Nine were subjected to verbal and physical assaults on a daily basis. Of course, these kids in high school are copying their parents. If not, hell, some of them high school kids, some of these high school kids was probably out there in the mob. And when the mob dispersed, they went their ass into school. Because, that's what white people do. They take their kids on uh, violent sprees. They bring the kids. Remember, lynchings were picnics. They used to take pictures in front of the burnt bodies or the dead carcasses hanging from trees. That was, that was normal for them. Some people still have those pictures, those postcards. The African American students were isolated and never placed in classes with each other, so they couldn't corroborate their torment. Now, that says something else. Because they isolated the kids, didn't place them in classes together. That was something that was orchestrated by administration and or the teachers. Because teachers can do unofficial schedule changes. Um, of course, we know administration have all the power to do official schedule changes. So when enrolling them, they made it they made it they especially made sure that they didn't put them all together. That's so sad. This one don't know what's going on with that one, and that one don't know what's going on with that one. But in reality, the same thing is happening to all of them because they are surrounded by the same type of people that came from the same type of racist ass houses. Can almost guarantee you that. On 3 separate occasions, Minnie Jean had cafeteria food spilled on her, but none of her white abusers ever seemed to get punished. Of course they did, because those in the school agree with it. In December 1957, she dropped her chili-laden tray on the heads of 2 boys in the cafeteria who were taunting and knocking into her. She said, I got tired of this shit. And I don't blame her. She was suspended for 6 days. 6 days. And she had just got to the school. She hadn't even been there, fool. What? She wasn't, well, hell, they couldn't sit out for 2 weeks from when they first enrolled. I mean, this is ridiculous. Now, remember how we measure funding. Students have to be present, and the funding that they were receiving, or that they would receive for these kids the following school year, they most likely missed out that funding because they were suspending the kids. And then also, they didn't finish the school year up. So essentially, for the citizens of the state, because those are federal dollars that they get, but there's also state dollars too. Most of the larger amount of the money comes from federal. So in a sense, when you think about it, the state lost money in doing this. But again, this is something that they are willing to sacrifice. And some of them, I don't believe, had no idea that's what they were doing. But they didn't care. They were so, they were basking in their racism. The school noticed how part the school notice that she received for the suspension is now part of the Smithsonian collection, along with a heartfelt note by her parents documenting all the abuse that their daughter had endured leading up to the incident. Then, February 1958, Tricky verbally responded to some jeering girls who had hit her in the head with a purse. The retaliation caused Tricky to be expelled from Central High School. Mm-mm-mm. So she said something to them for them hitting her. Now, she didn't respond physically, she only responded verbally. But yet, she was physically removed from the school for the entire remaining year. Mm-mm. That retaliation caused Tricky to be expelled. And she says, I had a sense of failure that lasted for decades over that. After she left Central, white students held printed signs that said, 1 down, 8 to go. Mm-mm. Now, these were the students. Now, what's your purpose? You didn't set out to do this. Now, when you have all 8 of them, then what? I just don't understand it. You've made it your purpose to, I mean, shit. I guess now they'll just go back to tormenting each other. Cause remember, they not exempt from that. They was tormenting each other before we even got there, before we was even in schools with them. So I guess that's just what they build their whole lives on, tormenting each other. Following her mid-year dismissal, Tricky was invited to New York to live in the home of Dr. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, African American psychologists who had conducted pioneering research that exposed the negative effects of segregation on African American children. Their now famous doll tests were part of the documentation used by the NAACP to argue the Brown v. Board of Education case. Tricky went on to attend Southern Illinois University and majored in journalism. In 1967, she married Roy Tricky, a fisheries biologist, and they started a family which eventually included 6 children. They moved to Canada to protest the Vietnam War, and she earned both a bachelor's and master's degree in social work. Later in her career, she returned to the United States and served in the Clinton administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Workforce Diversity at the Department of Interior. Now she works as an activist on behalf of peacemaking, youth leadership, the environment, and many other social justice issues. According to her kids, it took nearly 30 years before Tricky revealed to her children the full extent of her role as a foot soldier in the Civil Rights Movement. In 1996, 7 of them appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show and reconciled with some of the white students who had tormented them. I wonder if the adults ever reconciled. It seems like something worth exploring, especially now with the emergence of similar behavior. You know, CRT this, CRT that. A year later, and 40 years after the original crisis, then President Bill Clinton symbolically held the door open at Central High School for the 9. Clinton also awarded each of them the Congressional Gold Medal in 1999. In today's world, where our education system and narratives are often challenged, it's more important than ever to teach the true history of our people. The things we value, our contributions to human existence, are not just footnotes, they're headlines. We're not just participants in histories. We are architects. I also want to point out that Brown v. Board of Education was more than just a court case. The the court case is detailed in Margaret Atwood's book We Face the Dawn. It's a great, great book. Initially, the our community's primary goal wasn't to desegregate schools, but to secure equitable resources from the tax system. It's just that simple. Initially, that was the ask. Everyone, anytime you go to a court or any court, because even in criminal court, the prosecution is they have an ask also. But in civil courts, family courts, anything like that, there is an ask. You basically is asking the courts to do something, to give us to decide on the appropriate remedy for this injustice. And in most civil cases that I know specifically, that I've read on and researched and learned about, they they include the remedy. You know, the what they believe should be a remedy for their misjustice, or the misjustice that was done to them. And so in those cases, um, those black attorneys, they they didn't just leave it blank. They didn't just say, we grant the court to just make a decision based on whatever the court believes. No, they actually put in there, no, this is what we believe is owed to our communities that pay into this tax system. And um in researching this, I learned that there were some cold-hearted factual numbers in there. It wasn't just, hey, um, this school has a better, um, it wasn't just this school has a pool and we want a pool. This school has a better basketball court and we want a better basketball court. No, 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 no. This was detailed. This was detailed down to the penny. And in so many words, I'm not quoting, and I don't have the book in front of me, of course. But it made stark contrasts. It said the state of whatever, because it didn't say state. I want to say it said the federal government. The federal government spends um, $2 for every black child in public schools, based on the funding that was received for whatever years over the period. And then it went and said, and the same federal government spends $40 on each white child. So they were very clear on what they wanted, and it was in numbers. It was just black and white, cut and dry. It was no, well, y'all got 5 schools. We want 5 schools. No, 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 no. It was cut and dry down to the pupils. And we know that, or we should know now, that's essentially how funding is decided in public schools. It's based on the number of kids within the district. It's based on the number of kids enrolled in a specific school. That's how the funding is break down by the school. It goes from the district, and then the district money, they break that down based on the school levels and based on each child. Based on each child, each school gets this so much amount of money. Now that money is only it's promised based on the attendance, the amount of time the child attends school. And so And then they have what we call a capture date. And this is the number that is captured by the district, which is then sent over to the state government, then sent over to the federal government, that tells how many kids were in school on this day at in this month. And all those numbers, they use that as the sort of the capture average number. And then funding either goes up or down based on how many kids regularly attend school after that date. So we see that in many cases, you can almost say that Brown v. Board sort of helped with the drill down of those numbers, because before, now I could be wrong, but from the cases that I looked up, I didn't see any information that was drilled down to the dollar per kid. Now, I did see numbers based on the population of an area, the population of the districts that it serves in the area, but I didn't see anything that drilled down. And I'm saying not see anything, and I'm talking about from that time period back in the 1940s and 50s. And so we can say that the Brown v. Board of Education case actually helped in drilling down those numbers. So who else would have, brought numbers all the way down to the penny unless it was someone who was getting shortchanged? That's how I see it. And so it is my belief that that case is really how we can get down to the actual number in dollars in what we spend to service our kids in public schools. Now, I've read some before about Anna Julia Cooper and her case, and there was some board meetings that I read about that, but I did not see the detailed numbers in dollars per pupil. I didn't see that, and that could be an oversight on my part, but if I don't see it now, I promise you I will read it eventually. But this case was the first that I've seen that they detailed so much in the education system, and it was cut and dry in the disparities. I mean, it was no way. It's just no way that they could have done it any better. And people asked that, or people say that, oh, we were better off when we were segregated. Well, in a sense, we kind of wasn't. Because if we think about people like Anna Julia Cooper, okay, in segregated schools, she still had to fight a white board. Now, at a period in our education system, now remember, these are our schools. We're segregated. These are all black kids being serviced, right? But guess what? The local governments, federal governments agreed that these all black schools and these all black school districts needed to be overseen by white people. So you had all black schools, you had black principals in many cases. Anna Julia Cooper was one of them, and this was over high school. All black principals high school. You had maybe one or two superintendents that were black. But guess what? The government Mm. Y'all just, you just have to, you have to hear it because I really, really hate when people say stuff like, we were better off during segregation. First of all, shut up. You wasn't born, okay? You don't know what the hell was going on during segregation. How the hell you know we was better off? You wasn't nothing. Your ass wasn't here. First of all, won't you go and talk to somebody who's actually here, who's here right now, and ask them if they were better off at a different period, a more hostile period at that. So I'm gonna need you to shut up, and I think I need a lot of people who wasn't born then, who had no idea about the time frame or about the system, the times, what was going on. If you was black, because if you was white, I think you should. I don't think unless you've studied, you can't understand. And I think even if you studied, you can't understand. You can say you saw it, but it's not the same. So you need to sit down and learn something. These black people, you thinking that they were more better off, as if they were more quote unquote free than you are now. Well, guess what? Not only did they, block black leaders from running our schools, black superintendents, black principals, black board members, education board members. Guess what they did? They said, well, I don't want to be, they looking at us with their nose up like, no, I don't want to be, I don't want to be no superintendent of no black school, or I don't want to be the principal of no black school. I don't want to sit on the board of a black school. This was all looked upon like it was something wrong with us, right? But then what they said, well, you know what? Y'all black people can't do stuff by y'allself. So this what we gonna do. We gonna create a black side and a white side. So we gonna have a black superintendent and a white superintendent. We're gonna have a black board of education and a white board of education. We're gonna have, they segregated the jobs that oversaw us just so that they could have a job that they were getting paid from. Just think about that. They have no interest at all whatsoever in the education of black kids. Yet, they felt it was necessary to create an all-white board of education that sought over black schools. They also created a white superintendent's position that was in, I wouldn't even say, from what I read, I wouldn't even call it a co-position, okay? Because at the end, you saw that the white person, whatever the white superintendent said, those changes was what was being implemented. All the ideas and the suggestions from the black superintendents or the black leaders in that area, in that field, they were ignored. They were completely ignored. They just thought like, oh, they don't know what they talking about. Yet these are the people who are here. They're here with our kids. They know what the kids like. They know what the kids want. They know what the kids asking for. They know what the kids need. Not only that, we were also building something because we had to integrate into a society that segregated us, but and cut us out of all of these different high level positions in the professional area. So what did we have to do? We had to make those students. We had to prepare those students for what was to come of their futures. And so there was some changes here and there. There were some experiments here and there, but all coming from a place of pure love and respect and admiration for our people. That's not the case on coming from the white side. First of all, his ass is in this job because they fired him from being superintendent of the white schools because he fucked up over there. So instead of his ass going back to school and learning something and then going and trying to be a superintendent for real, his ass says, well, shit, put me over to black people because I'm going to stay in a high position. I can't be demoted. What I'm going to do? Go be a principal? Oh, no. That's beneath me now. I'm superintendent. So his ass ain't got no job. So he go talk to his friends, his cronies, and they say, well, you know what? Well, shit, you know what? Let's just make you a position. And in that position, you just oversee. Y'all remember that word, right? Oversee. You just oversee the black schools. Now, we didn't just be very clear about what's going on here. We didn't ask y'all to teach us. We was already doing that. We didn't ask y'all to train us. We had people doing that. There was a lot of educators that came from up north and trained black educators to be educators. There was also black educators that trained other black educators in the South. It's like what I said before. This is something that's innate within us. The period right after enslavement, what's the first thing we asked for? We need to get educated. And we didn't ask people to educate us. We said we need to educate ourselves. We need to get educated by any means. And what happened? Well, I talk about some of those stories in the episode before about how some of the first black schools got started, how some of the first black teachers were professionally trained. I also talked about how a lot of those people who were formerly enslaved got college degrees. Some of them hadn't. I mean, they first few years of being on this earth, they didn't know how to read and write, but they learned it. Not only did they learn it, they excelled at it. That's why you see a huge emergence of black black higher education institutions, because he said, well, shit, since they don't want us there, then we'll just do it ourselves. And that's a lot of what was going on. But I just need people to realize, when you say stuff like we were better off before segregation, you sound like an idiot. You sound like someone who has not read, but you sound like an idiot, someone who's not experienced, someone who heard something from somebody else. Because only a message like that is something that's, hearsay type stuff. Because I just can't see somebody saying, well, we was better off being mistreated and stolen from, and as long as we were separate, it was better. No. So we had a few things going on here. One, we was separated, but then we had overseers who was telling us what to do, how to live, how to educate our kids. And then they was stealing from us. Like, that's a lot of shit going on there. It's not just cut and dry as, oh, it was segregation, we was better off. And those black attorneys, some of whom are still living today. Fred Cray, his book, Bus Ride to Justice. Beautiful, beautiful book. I may read some excerpts from it in the future. But it's a beautiful book. Detailed all the things that he went through. Fred Gray is still living today. It would just be now that would be something worth sitting and listening to. Some of the things that he had to experience, how he had to beat. How do you learn a system? Not just learn it and copy it, but learn it and create new from it. And not just create new just for the sake of creating, but creating new to beat it. It's like creating a game, creating a strategy to play a game and then beat the game while carrying out your strategy. Like that's some thinking that's beyond me. I know my mind doesn't work on those levels. Talk about walking and chewing gum at the same time. Like we could barely pay attention for, that had to take a lot of deep thinking and analyzing. And this man, Fred Gray, is still alive, still very much alive. He was a very close attorney worked a lot of cases for MLK, worked directly with MLK. He's still very much alive, and he's still working. I want to say he's over 80 now, but he's still working. And he said that actually in his book. He said his plan was to destroy everything about Jim Crow, its laws, everything that you could think of associated with Jim Crow. That was his life's work, he was set out to destroy it. And he did. And he still is. Now, you sit down and talk to somebody like Fred Gray and ask him if we were better off before, where he talked about how he had to ride 4 or 5 buses, I want to say. I think it was about 2 or 3 hours. He said the commute was to go to law school because his school didn't allow, where he lived, they didn't allow black people to go to law school. And so he had to travel hours every day to go to law school. Getting up at, as they would call it, 4 day in the morning. That's one of them grandma words. 4 day in the morning. I always ask my grandma, what time is 4 day? She would say 4 day. That's what it is. That's what time it is. 4 day. If it's day, you're late. Okay? That was exactly how my grandmother would describe it. If it's day, you're late. So in fighting these cases, those black lawyers saw that the amount of money that that was being spent on black children's education was significantly lower than the white children. And the cases specifically highlighted the stark inequities. It was just plain. And in those cases, like I said, we sought equitable educational resources. That's it. We wanted the same. If I pay $5 and you pay $5 and you give back $5, I want to give back $5 too. It's just that simple. It's nothing hard about that. But what was happening is black people was paying $5, white people was paying $5. Black people was getting back $1, white people was getting back $4. Well, there's a difference. I want my $3. Run me my money. Because I'm paying it too, right? Taxation without representation. That's what we fight for, right? Equal representation. Okay. And in that equal representation, that also includes resources. The resources should be distributed equally. That was the grievance from the Declaration of Independence, which is exactly what they argued in those cases. We did not ask to sit on side of white children. That was not the ask. Now, it evolved into a broader push for desegregation as a strategy. Now, that was only because state governments resisted equitable resource ac- Let me try that again. It evolved. Okay, because this is like it pisses me off because I'm thinking about the people who say stuff like we're better off. The the strategy evolved into desegregation because the state governments resisted. They didn't want to allocate the resources in an equitable way. They still did not. They wanted to continue to give the white families who paid $5, $4 back, and the black families who paid $5, $1 back. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to keep doing that. And so the the movement, the secret desegregation part of it was just added to the strategy that was being fought in the courts. Now it was demonstration, okay? Because in the same way today, we can't see those court cases, right? Unless we go searching for them or reading them. I'm a school teacher, middle school teacher. I know we teach it, but what do we teach about it? We don't go deep into it. I was an adult when I learned about the number disparities. Like reading those numbers, the actual disparities and how much they spent on black children versus white children, that's not taught in middle school history. We do teach on Brown versus Board of Education, but it's just surface level. We don't go deep into it. And so you may have a kid at no fault of their own that's taught that Brown versus Board of Education allowed black kids to go to school with white kids. And that's it. They don't know how much detail goes into that. And that's because we don't teach it. We just don't teach it. Not only that, you can't put that on a test. And I'm not saying us as teachers can't put it on a test. The state, because and this is another conversation we'll have at another time about how these standardized tests are created. Teachers aren't writing these tests. We don't write the tests, especially the standardized tests. We don't see those tests until the day of. Actually, we don't see them the day of. The kids see them. We are not supposed to look at them. And they put out a release test usually the following year after that test has been set. And that release test is, from what we're told, is not the exact same test that the students saw. So we never see these tests. We couldn't tell you, the way the questions are worded based on the actual test. When we go and study all of this and kind of, break down these tests to teach it to our students, because yes, that's what we do. We teach the test. We use release tests that I can't tell you that I've ever had my hands, I've had my hands on it, never sat down and actually read an actual test that a student took. That's all that is controlled by the state. And so you can't test that. And it's one I mean, it's one of several events, but within that era. And if you think about those tests, they're about 50 to 75 questions, if I'm not mistaken. No, no, no. I think I'm doing okay. No, the full test I want to say is the full test may be 100 questions, but the section on history is probably about 25 to 35 questions. And so if you break it up into different eras, if you section it off by eras, you may have 3 or 4 questions from huge significant eras. Yeah, that's kind of how they break it out. Yeah, you may have 3 or 4 questions. And so from my research, I know for sure there is questions from every release test um, that I've studied, went over. There is a question about the civil rights era. I would say it's either 1 to 2 questions, no more than 5. Um, I would actually say it's no more than 5 questions about Black history, as a whole, in totality. And so the Brown case may be a question on there, but then again, it may not. There are tests over the years that didn't have no mention of Martin Luther King. And I mean, these are state tests. So, and of course, the state test, that's the test that decides if the kid passes to the next grade or whatever. Our tests don't determine that. Our test only gives them, their letter grades. It's really an assessment for us to know how we should teach them, if we should teach more or less in this area or not, to prepare them for the big test at the end. I mean, that's how it works. The cycle, it goes, it repeats over and over like that. So we mention this stuff to them. We have to know that they digest it, but surface level, what my kids would need to learn is a significant case that was decided by the Supreme Court that changed the education system. That's Brown v. Board of Education. That's them. That's the most that they were on surface, what they would need to know. That's as deep as the question would go about, the education system. That's as deep as it go. And that doesn't go towards the education system. That's really about the civil rights era. So believe me, there is nothing. We are teaching nothing about the education system or the development of the education system in history at all, which I think we should, but no, we don't. So those are just questions directly about the civil rights era. And that's as far as it'll go, as about Brown v. Board of Education. I can't say any other way that they would connect it. They would connect it to civil rights movements. They were connected to a series of cases, because they have to know important Supreme Court cases. They'd have to know that. So that's just about it. And so they're not learning about why the cases were brought up. They're not learning about the disparities between the students as far as resources. They're not learning about how the school facilities were different, and none of that. They're not learning about that. They don't have to. I mean, not for, at least as far as the state goes, they don't have to. But also, as far as the test and them passing on to the next grade, which is the most important thing to them and to parents, they don't have to know that. So even as an educator, I learned this as an adult. I knew that the cases weren't just about going to school with white kids, but the details surrounding the cases and the drill down to the money. I didn't learn about that until I was an adult. And so a lot of people that say this and speak about this era as if it was some time that was, you know, a, what do you call it? Utopia. No, it wasn't, especially not for us. And this is one of the reasons why they were stealing from us. And the to continue with it, just an overview of it, of the strategy behind behind that part of the civil rights movement, because there was several moving parts, and this was just one of them. Of course, the desegregation emerged as a strategy, as a compromise by state governments under federal court orders, rather than a demand from the black community. Now, this is them compromising. They saying, well, shit, we're not going to give you the $5 or the $4. Well, or the $3. Because remember, it's $5 and we getting back 1, but white people getting back 4. Now they saying, well, shit, we not giving you the $3. Well, you know what? Why don't you just go over there and share they $4 with them? I mean, that's exactly how it was. It was like, no, we're not gonna give you the money. They were ordered to give the money. The courts ordered to give the money. And instead of them doing so, they said, well, we ain't gotta give you the money. We'll just let you share what they got. And schools was one of, that was just one of the strategies that showed how there was a distinct disparity. That was a way that they could show the numbers, black and white, was in schools. We could do it now. We do it now. You see, with schools, hospitals, parks, playgrounds, museums, different public accommodations. We can point out how, okay, if it's in an area that's predominantly black, this is what the cost is to upkeep the maintenance on it, or the cost to build it over here versus what they're paying or versus what they're spending to get theirs built. We can now directly show the disparities using the strategy that came from, these civil rights cases. And the shift in strategy marked a critical turn in the fight for equality in education. The Brown case consolidated several cases: Briggs versus Elliott, Davis versus County School Board of Prince Edward County, Gebhardt versus Belton, and Bolin v. Sharp. And that represents a cross-section of America's segregated education system. Each case underscored the profound inequities and became instrumental in the unanimous Supreme Court decision that declared racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional. And you can read more in depth about that in Margaret Atwood's book, We Face the Dawn. It's a wonderful book. I really, really like it. It points out the different attorneys. She talks about the different attorneys that was a part of it. Talks about Spotswood Robinson and his part on it. A lot of these Howard students or Howard graduates, Howard Law graduates. It's a really, really good book. And just going back what I said before, there was a lot of nuances with the Board of Education case. And of course, a lot of the black people today who wasn't alive during segregation, they all have a problem with desegregation. Oh, we shouldn't have never did this. We shouldn't have never did this. And you hear a lot of them that say that reference Martin Luther King about integrating into a burning house. Now, I think when people use that, they are a little short-sighted, and I think that they are just, for one, it's I think it's like a miscalculation of Martin Luther King and what what he was talking about. It makes to me it makes it look as if Martin Luther King was a complainer, and I know he wasn't that. Um, Most of the time, the people who are using these quotes from him are a bunch of complainers. Martin Luther King wasn't a complainer. He was action oriented. He got in there. He got his hands dirty. Um, and I think it was more of his assessment of the situation, being truthful and straight honest about what was happening. But it didn't mean for people to sit back and just say, "Oh, this is bad. This is horrible. This is horrible." I think it was a a call to action in the sorts. It was saying to us, this is just because we're here, it's not peachy, okay? It still requires work. This is not the end. I think that was him saying this is not the end. Look, we are in a burning house. I think that um his perspective, well, I'm gonna say not his perspective. Well, I'll comment on his perspective, but I think those people who use those quotes, they are they overlook the context and the original intentions of um, Dr. King and the nonviolent movement. Those were legal strategies, and then it was legal strategies and also demonstrations that were aimed at dismantling Jim Crow laws, that and it was aimed at dismantling Jim Crow laws within a system that created the Jim Crow laws. So it's sort of like what I was explained earlier about how um, attorney Fred Gray was in a puzzle, creating a puzzle while trying to beat the puzzle that he was in. And so um, that saying that he told us, he said he integrated us into a burning house, that's just completely overlooking what he originally sought out to do in those protests, in the court cases, everything surrounding those. Um, and he told us, he talked about it in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. Their movement approach wasn't just about integration. It was about leveraging the legal system to protect the rights of all citizens, right? Because that's what it says, right? It says all men are created equal. Wow. I give you an unequal portion of, that's the system that they were dealing with. For them to take his comment about a burning house out of context, it's without acknowledging his meaning behind the comment, it's a slight against MLK, if you ask me, Because it's basically saying that someone, like, the way that I see it, you can't be that heavily involved in a movement to change something that you see, that you're experiencing, without noticing that what you are trying to gain access to is on fire. He knew that. I think he knew well before he began that this place that we are trying to gain access to is on fire. And this place, meaning America, this place is on fire. Because, not to mention, hell, it's always been on fire. They always burning some shit down. They always blowing some shit up, burning some shit down. He saw that. He saw that. That's, to me, that's an insult on his intelligence. He knew very much well that this place was on fire. It wasn't him saying, "Oh shit, I fucked up and brought y'all in a burning house." No, it was more of, it's my belief, it was more of him saying, "Okay, y'all, now we done got past this hurdle, okay? Now put on your damn fire suit. Go get the water. Go get the bricks. Go get the salt. Go get the cement. I need somebody over here getting this. I need somebody over here getting that." And what we need to do is, because we now in this house, not only were we in this house, we've always been in this house. But he's saying, go get all the shit that we need. It's in the back. We always had it. It's not like we're not telling nobody to go and, create some shit with some stuff that we already had. He's saying, go get it. And now we've organized to have a say-so in how we can put out this fire. And he's saying to us, get geared up. Get ready. Because we about to fight some shit that really don't have a track record of losing. And I mean fire. I don't mean people. I mean fire. So he's like, get ready. Black people, go get your gear. Gear up. Get ready to fight this fire. Also, while we fight this fire, get ready to build as we fight. And that's exactly what they were doing in the South with the demonstrations. There were some infrastructures that were built. And while they were being built, they were still fighting. They were fighting and building, fighting and building, fighting and building. That was constantly. It was, just a constant moving wheel. Fighting, building, fighting, building. All of those that we talked about last time, the NAACP, that's the infrastructure. SNCC, SCLC, Friends of SNCC, Black Power movements, all of those are infrastructures that were built while we were fighting. And so I don't think that Martin Luther King was saying, "Oh shit, everybody scream, we in a burning house." No. He also wasn't saying, "We don't need no water, let the motherfucker burn." He wasn't saying that either. He was saying, "Okay, y'all, we in this shit now. Let's get to work. It's work. We not done. You can't sit down, can't relax, you can't chill." And I think that's what we did. We chilled. We chilled out. And now we are fighting tooth and nail just for them to talk about us in school. We're not fighting for them to teach Black history. We're fighting for them to talk about us. Like, that's really what the fight is. Like, they're saying, no, we are completely getting rid of anything that's black. We ain't talking about y'all. Nope, we ain't doing that. So, as black people, as educators, that's what that's what we're fighting for. They don't want to even talk about us because just the mention of us is somehow a threat to their existence. So imagine if they actually taught our history. They don't even want to mention it. Right now, the word is woke, but the word is woke, but woke means black, basically. Anything that's woke is black. So they actually went as far as writing a law against being woke. How is that even? Like, that's some Jim Crow shit for you. And so, as a black educator in Texas, I chose to delve into the vital topic of history, of teaching our true history, because it's a journey that not only acknowledges the struggles and triumphs of our ancestors, but also celebrates their monumental role in shaping the world. Our history is rich, it's complex, it's inspiring. It's filled with stories of resilience, innovation, and leadership. As educators, we face challenges in ensuring our students understand its rich legacy. There's a growing debate, like I said before, about what aspects of history should be taught in school, and pretty much concerning African Americans. It's crucial to confront these challenges head on and advocate for a curriculum that is inclusive and truthful. And if it doesn't work, build the curriculum we ask for. Tell the stories we want to hear, the stories our children desperately need to hear. We're not just bystanders in history, we have been and continue to be its shapers and movers and influencers. Our contributions extend beyond overcoming adversity. They include shaping cultural, scientific, and societal advances. It's essential that this narrative is not lost or diluted in our education systems. This fight for teaching our true history is not just about correcting inaccuracies or filling gaps. It's about empowering the next generation with knowledge and pride in their heritage. It's about teaching them that they come from a lineage of greatness and they too have the potential to build and contribute to a better world. So let's continue this important work with passion and determination. Let's ensure that our history isn't taught not as a series of footnotes in somebody else's narrative, but as a vibrant, integral part of the global story that continues to unfold. Our children deserve to see themselves as the architects of history that they are. As we wrap up today's episode, let's remember, education is not just about learning facts, it's about understanding our identity and our potential. It's about empowering the next generation of leaders, thinkers, and change makers. This is our mission, our passion, and our duty. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope this episode has inspired you to think deeper about the role of education in shaping a just and equitable society. This is Nitra signing off from the Political Education for Freedom podcast. Until next time, keep learning, keep teaching, and keep pushing for a world that recognizes and celebrates our true history and potential. Thank you.